What is up, YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about a topic that a lot of people have discussed online, in my comments, just asked me personally, or just it's I think a topic that's great for new players or those who are heading to regional championships and international championships themselves. And that topic today is how to predict a regionals metagame or a internationals metagame or whatever, like a big tournament. How do you, as a player, head into a tournament and kind of know what should I prepare for? What should I be thinking about? Like, where is my head supposed to be at? And that's a little bit of an interesting conundrum when you're heading into, obviously, a new format. Silver Tempest just dropped about a week ago. And we're having the first tournament next weekend at the Latin American International Championships in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So if you guys are fans of the game or want to just prepare, heading to Toronto, heading to Arlington, heading to San Diego in the upcoming 3 regionals, this would be a great tournament to watch, to keep an eye on, to see what the initial metagame looks like. So for me, who is heading to Brazil, what am I looking at? How am I preparing? And that's what today's video is going to be there to help you guys. So the first things first is I always go to existing results. And so the first thing I've already done is gone to Japan results, and you've seen me do other videos on that. If you guys haven't, go check those out. And I usually look at those to see what is Japan playing. They're a couple months ahead of us. They have entered this format already. They are playing some of these lists that are a little bit more interesting. Some of the cards they have that we don't, yes, sure, whatever. But to the most part, what is performing successfully over there? What cards are doing well over there? And so that's where I start thinking about those niche cards, thinking about tech cards, thinking about archetypal cards and why they're in the deck. Next thing, I go to play.limitless TCG, and it's been about a week of online tournaments. So a couple of multi-100 person tournaments have happened. And my philosophy has always been, if a deck wins a tournament, it's worth looking at the very least, regardless of how it got there, what its road was. It could have been a complete fluke, but you still got to look at it and I think show it some respect to determine whether or not it's worth moving forward with. And so the first deck we're going to look at in the number one meta share is Lugia Archeops. When it comes to meta share, by the way, the top 5 decks are usually the most important ones for me. Top 3 is like fine in most metagames, but this is one of those metagames where we're kind of going down to 5 viable decks, or like 5 very popular decks, and then like 6 onward kind of falls. Like it's like I could expect to see multiple Lugia, multiple Mew, multiple Lawson, multiple Reggies, multiple Giratina, and then once you hit like Arc Drowdon, maybe one, maybe Kyurem, one Kyurem, maybe one V-Cobalt Reggie. Like that's like kind of where my mind is. So like when you're preparing, you have to think about how many do I expect to hit in a tournament on any given day. And that's where you have to start thinking about stuff. So with Lugia Archeops, which is now the most popular deck in the online tournament series, as well as in Japan, and it's performing very well. So instantly you have to go, well, there's some merit to Lugia Archeops. This is one of those decks where it is insanely powerful. Why is it powerful, and what are the ways to play it? And so we've already seen a couple of lists, so we're going to look at how people have been playing it online. We had a 254-person event that was won by a Aurora Lugia build, and we have to look at like what made this a little bit different. How did this player get to the position of winning that made them so unique from the other Lugia builds? Right off the bat, they've got the Amazing Rare Raikou, Radiant Charizard, and Amazing Rare Yveltal as their package of attackers. We see that there is a Tool Jammer, which is not typically in some of the other lists that we've seen so far. A heavier grip of Collapse and a heavier grip of Double Turbo Energy to just kind of get those attacks going, keep the Collapse to hurt Reggies, bounce the path to the peaks, just get to that point where you can actually play the game, and a copy of Regenerative Energy. So this player must have thought, hey, Regenerative Energy is really good if I hit something like a Lost Box, or if I hit something that, like decks that are more prone to two-shotting, which the biggest one in my mind is Lost Box that puts the damage on your board and has to deal with those 2 prizers. So Regenerative Energy really comes into play there. So that's where you kind of get an idea for this. But what other Lugia builds have been doing well? Well, this player who got second out of 383 players was playing a build that's been a little bit more unique online, which is a heavy path to the peak build, playing more V-Guards, more Turbos, and just only colorless attackers like Regigigas to deal with Mew. And now this build is a little more interesting because it's got cards like Sharon's Care, heavier path, and all it's trying to do is survive through these decks that are trying to barrel through them. Lugia is going to try to barrel through the Lugia Mirror. Mew is going to try to barrel through Lugia. Palkia might try to barrel through Regigigas. Like, if you can prevent them from one-shotting you enough times, well, then you win the game. And that's the logic we're using here. So this is where you have to try both versions out to see which one is actually your cup of tea and which one actually answers the metagame better, if that makes any sense. Now that's Lugia. What's coming up next is Mew Genesect. Now what is different about Mew Genesect? I know it's always been king of the format for quite a while. Like it's been like top 2, top 3 during its entire lifetime. But we've got the Forest Seal Stone giving fusion Mew back some new life. And that Fusion Mew also is much better because of decks like Lugia, which get exploited pretty easily by a turn 1 knockout. Now this build here that we're looking at does not play catchers. It's a little bit more of a hybrid between the DTE Mew that we've been used to for the last couple months and the Fusion Mew that has been a little bit more tame. This doesn't really have a great way to get the first 2 prizes going second if there's no 2 prizes in the active besides 1 rope, but it still is relying on getting this combo off as efficiently as possible to just attack. Now we've seen more aggressive lists in the form of catchers. I believe this one has some catchers. I am bugging. This one does not have catchers. I think this one did. Yes, this build had catchers and has a little bit more of a hybrid build as well, but the 3 catchers are where this version of Mew is like, hey, I want to get that turn 1 combo off every game. I want to get that turn 1 knockout on a 2 prizer, and I want to get 2 more prizes somewhere in there after my Meloetta goes down, and then my Echoing Horn, and Mew will close out the game. And that's been the strategy for these kinds of decks for a long time, and this is the perfect exemplification, personification of what it's trying to do. So that's kind of where that comes into play. And then you have to think about our good friend DTE Mew. What happened to DTE Mew? Where is it? Well, it's still around. There are players performing very well with it, but you have to kind of try it out and figure out what the fixes are. This player here is playing 2 copies of Heroes Metal to try to mitigate the Drapions, to try to mitigate Lugia is going 1-shot with Lugia, 1-shot with Yveltal, and end the game. So this is what this player's solution was to some of these more negative matchups that are appearing in the format in the form of just making your Mew as consistent and solid as possible. And this is why Mew is still a second place deck in the format. It might win LAIC, it might win our regionals, it might do anything, but you have to prepare for it accordingly. Now this is probably the spiciest of the top three decks to look at, which is Lost Zone Box. Now Lost Zone Box as a whole has been performing very well. This build that won the late night the other night is playing 2 copies of Radiant Rayquaza, which is, or not Radiant, Amazing Rare Rayquaza, which is crazy. A card that is nothing more than binder fodder, has made its way out of the binder due to this Mirage Gate Colress Experiment engine and the need to one-shot Pokemon, yeah. So this player expertly analyzed that this card would be really good for one-shotting stuff. A Zapdos to deal with Arceus, a Raikou to deal with Lugia in the early game, mid game, whatever, and an Ice Cube to deal with Regigigas. So this is how you kind of prepare for what's coming up. So if you're testing, you might have to think about this. And then we had another player bring a very stock standard Lost Box, or so you think. Except there's an Aqua Storm Kyogre here, meant to close out the game with the Mirage Gate combo, with the Energy Recycler, just do a ton of damage to the bench and swipe it. So this is where cards like Manaphy kind of come into play. Is this actually a threat? Is this something that we should be trying ourselves? Those kinds of questions will come into play. And then we have the stock standard build, something more similar to what Pedro Eugenio Torres won a Regionals with about a week ago, and Tor Reklev won Regionals with a few weeks ago, or 2 months ago at this point, yeah. But what is good is not broken. It is still very strong. The adaptation here is there's Temple of Sinnoh, because that is what can stick a Lugia player. And Lugia is now the threat number 1, and that's what Lost Box is really good at doing. So this is how you start preparing for these kinds of decks. Now coming up is Reggie's in 4th. What did Reggie's get that makes it still a top deck? Well, Reggie's got a couple of good matchups, especially in the form of Lugia. And Mew is still Mew. But Serena is a card that they can now play in the deck. Regigigas, typically did not want to play Boss because it clogs up in your hand and you don't really have that use case to use it because you're digging for resources, digging for attackers. Oftentimes you're forced to swing into the active. But now you have Serena, which acts as a dual threat boss. It's a boss with bringing up the V, or it's a card that can thin out and draw you cards. And that's valuable in a deck like this that wants every supporter to be continuing the combo of attacking every turn. Getting those energies into the discard, well, Serena does it. Drawing more cards, well, Serena does it. Boss, well, Serena does it. You guessed it. So Regigigas has stamped its place into the top 5, in my opinion, as well. And then 5th and foremost is the Giratina deck that has been oh so powerful in this Lost Origin format. One of the top 2 poster childs of the format. And it's still going to be around. Just because Giratina doesn't have the greatest Lugia matchup doesn't mean that it can't try. Playing heavy copies of Temple of Sinnoh and heavy copies of Roxanne might be the answer you need to stop Lugia from doing what they need to do. You don't know that until you try. You'll be playing a thick grip of Giratina and the rest of the whole combo that exists to deal with whatever matchups you want. The deck does not change too much, but how are you going to adapt it to make sure you can try to beat these matchups? Well, that's where testing comes into play. And so in my personal opinion, when you go into regionals, what I personally do is look at all top 5 of these decks, these options, and try testing them. For someone like me who's leaving on Monday night, like Monday night is the last night I have in the States effectively, I have to start figuring out what niche cards do I need, what niche decks do I want to try. By the time I'm on my plane, I should have 3 decks in my mind that I want to play, that I think can answer the metagame, that these are the 3 decks that will take me furthest in the tournament. Yes, it's a Tuesday before a regionals, so some players might need a little bit more time to figure out their top 3. They might need to get to that number 1. Or for me, it's international, sorry. But you have to understand what are you most comfortable with. How are you understanding all the matchup spread for that deck? If you are someone who's been playing Mew your entire format, or like the entire time you've been playing Pokemon, and all of a sudden Lugia Archeops is something new, and Lost Zone Box is something new, and you're like, I know how to deal with these. I have played enough Mew that from the Mew side of things, I can figure out what you're going to try to do. But you're thinking, oh, Lost Zone is better. Let me just pick up this deck and try to play it. You're not going to be good at it. It's going to be very difficult to just pick up a deck and be good at it. So understanding matchup spread, understanding how to prize map, sequence, figure out your win conditions with each deck, you have to try it at least. Like for me, I've tried out some of the weirder Lost Zone Box decks because I saw the Kyogre deck and I was like, this makes sense, but I want to try it. I need to figure it out like by giving it a go. Like I'm more of a learning by doing person. So when you play a couple of games with it, you understand the flow of the deck. You understand the how you're supposed to go from point A to point B to point C to just winning the game. And that is something that's invaluable. So for those of you who don't have as much time, that's where these videos come into play to kind of tell you this is what the matchup spread should be, this is what you should be doing in each of these matchups. And we don't really have that breakdown as much. If you guys want more of that expert breakdown, James Cox, top 4 World Championship finisher, has made a YouTube channel. Check that out, guys. He is very, very good, and he breaks down matchups expertly. And I'll be trying to do more of the same as well on this channel because I want you guys to learn, get better. And I mean, Yokohama is only 9 months away, so I'm trying to get as many people to qualify. And I mean, I love Worlds, and I hope you guys can all experience the joy of the World Championships. So that being said, let me know in the comments below what kind of questions you have about how to prepare for big tournaments, how to get competitive from a newer player standpoint, because I've been playing for so long, it kind of like eludes me when I think about it. So I would really appreciate that to kind of help you guys get prepared for tournaments. And if you like this content, like, subscribe, and see you guys next time.